Good evening. Thank you for joining us, both those of you here tonight and any of you that are watching with us remotely on online or on TV. If anyone would like a agenda that's here with us tonight, they're to the right of the door as you go out. If you're watching on ACTV, you can access one from Athens-Clarke.com. If you have a cell phone with you tonight, we have a very small audience, please turn them off or to silent. And I'm looking to see if there's anything else. I forgot my notes tonight, folks, so I'm going to have to wing it. Ms. Spratt, would you call the roll for us for our special meeting?
Jefferson. Here. Sams.
Here.
Link.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith. Bale.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Girtz.
Here.
And Hammond.
Here.
We got a quorum.
Thank you. Do I have a meeting to enter, a motion to enter into executive session?
Also move. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will now move on to our agenda setting session, but I have one quick thing I'd like to do before we start. Mr. Girtz, can you come forward, please? You're in trouble. You may not, this is, I guess, your first service then. So this is for 10 years of service with Athens-Clarke County. We're proud.
It's been a long 10 years.
There will be a couple of opportunities for citizen input tonight on our consent agenda, which are items 1 through 5, and then on our new business, which are items 6 through 12. This is the time that we will have citizen input. If there's anyone who would like to, excuse me, Jean, do you need to call the roll again?
No.
Okay. I don't see anybody here that I don't think that would like to make comments. So we've got for those of you watching, we've got a report and staff person tonight, which is the first time this has ever happened. So we'll come behind the roll. Behind the rail. Is there any commissioner that would like to take anything off of the consent agenda for discussion? Ms. Link?
Number 3 and number 4, please.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We will start. We'll go to new business, and I assume we don't have anybody to comment on our new business items either. So we'll start on our new business and start with our agenda items that were taken off of our consent agenda, which are items number 3. Ms. Link, would you like to discuss that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, number 3, the Church Street residential park, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to again request that GovOps be able to add new streets to this program. I've gotten lots and lots of requests. About adding some streets to this program. So.
Do you want to put that back on consent?
Yeah, I'm happy to put it back on the consent agenda. I just wanted to bring that up.
Sure, thank you. And number 4, Housing Authority use of eminent domain. Did you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, that's 400 Bazzelle. This is I've gotten requests from some residents over there regarding the connectivity in that neighborhood, and it appears that the Housing Authority has some plans for some infill housing, and there's a great deal of opportunity in that neighborhood for some affordable single-family homes, which is the kind of housing that we need, especially in our in-town neighborhoods. But there's really bad connectivity. The grid over there is pretty bad, but there are some large lots that pose an opportunity to reconnect the grid, extend some right-of-ways. So I just wanted to bring that up and ask staff to start taking a closer look at that neighborhood and some opportunities to connect that grid and reestablish some of the connectivity for the folks who live back in like Peach Street, James, Julius, Helen, yeah, there's just some real opportunity to kind of fix that neighborhood and make it more desirable for some more development.
So do you want to leave that one on
I'm
consent?
happy to put that
Okay.
one back on too.
Okay. We'll move on now to our new business that's listed here in item number 6. Does any commissioner want to say anything about that?
I'll say something about
Okay.
it. I know we haven't had a lot of food. We've only had like what, one, just two, and they're still struggling with these state health department regulations, which it seems like other counties they seem to be able to skirt them. And I've heard from some folks who would like to start food trucks who are talking about having their kitchens in other counties because somehow they're able to get away with it in other counties, but not here. So I'm just kind of wondering how we get around this issue. And, if there's, I know the ADDA is going to have a forum on food trucks. Is that correct, Mike? I saw
I'm not sure.
Is it ADDA or DABA? I saw something coming up. So I hope we can have a little more public discussion about our food trucks and talk about maybe expanding the opportunities for them somehow.
It's right.
I just wanted to add that in the agenda report, it talked about there had been numerous inquiries about the food truck process, and I would suspect that since we had this year opportunity to review it, now that we are going to approve it and it's going to be an ordinance, that if part might be taken away and they'll have it ready for them to sign up in January if we pass this. That's my thought.
Just to reinforce that, I have heard that some of those who were looking at getting a permit or even going into the business were discouraged by the fact that the ordinance expired in a year. So I encourage us not to do that again. We can always address it again if there are issues that come up in the years ahead.
I believe this ordinance does not have a sunset on it this time.
I think for this particular one, we put that in place at the suggestion of the Government Ops Committee, specifically for the reasons that it was a new thing, and obviously there was a lot of local concern about this. So we just wanted to see what where it would play out and how it's played out. And certainly, I would agree that if once we pass this, hopefully pass this, the continuation of it on the first Tuesday, that there wouldn't be that sort of provision in there that we readdress it each year. And like Commissioner Neesmith said, if there's problems or ways to expand it at some point in the future, then that's an opportunity to look at it. But I think for right now, let's continue what we have on the ground and see how it plays out. Certainly, as interest becomes more available for food trucks here in Athens. I know Jittery Joe's is doing one over on Barber Street, and I understand that the newspaper building has some food trucks out there on occasion. So as private property owners are doing that, then it's going to increase the interest as well for more of a food truck culture here in Athens. But I'm glad we were able to do this, and I hope we can continue it as it is, and just as people get more used to it.
Would you like to put that? Oh, Kelly.
I'd be happy to put this on consent. Slightly counter to, I think, Melissa's read of what's happening with the health department regulations. I talked to some Atlanta area vendors, and I think part of what has happened is that the Atlanta market, obviously being quite a bit larger, just has greater opportunity for a commercial kitchen available proximate to where the food truck is operating. What I hope is that we're able to develop in that mold and perhaps even have shared kitchens of multiple food truck vendors. But I've not gotten reports of anybody skirting regulations so much as just in talking to folks out there. There's just greater opportunity because there are more spots.
But if I could add, I'm sorry, here.
Please.
Yeah,
I was just going to add something about the commercial kitchen. Certainly, there's an opportunity, I think, for a nonprofit or some private enterprise that would like to start a commercial kitchen. I can see a demand not only for food trucks utilizing it, but certainly some people that want to sell their baked goods and such as that, or whatever they make. So anyway, just throwing it out there for whoever may be interested.
Mr. Neesmith.
Well, and that's exactly what's happened in Atlanta. Is they've somehow come into a cooperative agreement about sharing sanitary sewer disposal and shared kitchens, because there's a large enough group of food truck businesses to do that. So hopefully we can get to that point.
Anybody else from that one? Okay, on consent agenda, Jean. And number 7 is park facility improvements. Anybody want to discuss that one?
I
Ms.
have
Link?
a couple of questions. Regarding the Wow Park and the dog park, the staff report talked about a Cultural Affairs Commission recommendation for art. Were these 2 different projects? Because I know Wow is getting its public art, but the dog park, are they considered in the same budget?
There was a, oh, go ahead, Robert.
And my recollection is that it was just for the WOW playground portion.
So the Cultural Affairs Commission didn't recommend public art for the dog park portion?
I don't think we addressed that specifically. The dog park, I mean, the SPLOST proceeds are really for the WOW playground. So
Okay.
what they're recommending, I'm not saying they didn't recommend it, but what they're recommending the art for the WOW playground itself.
But is it the same budget, the playground and the dog park, or are they 2 separate budget items?
I think they were 2 separate, but we'll go back and clarify that.
Okay, I'm just curious as to why they wouldn't recommend an art project for the dog park. It seems like a really good opportunity for functional seat piece or something. And also, the tennis courts. I've gotten, Kelly, you were in on this too. We got some requests from folks who like to play bike polo, and that apparently tennis courts are ideal for that. And they're having a hard time using our courts because the posts that hold the nets can't be removed. Is that what the issue was?
I think that's right. They're cemented in place rather than being removable.
And so I'd like to ask staff as they move forward with those projects to consider, at least a couple of the courts to install removable posts so the courts can be used for other purposes. We could probably get more diversity of use out of them. I'm sure there are other things, they use the courts for the farmers market over at Bishop. And I'm also curious to know if there are any future plans for expanded facilities at Holland Sports Complex, something like basketball courts. We've got a lot of lower income housing over there, and I feel like that facility isn't getting the diverse kind of use that the kids who live out there kind of require. Is there anything in the Leisure Services Master Plan to address that?
I mean, I think that's one of the things that does need to be studied. I mean, at a staff level, what we've talked about is really a park master plan, not only just for Holland Park, but for a number of our other facilities in general. So specifically in terms of basketball courts and so forth, we don't have a plan at Holland Park, but I will state that we do have an incredible amount of demand for the space that is currently at Holland Park. I mean, between soccer, baseball and football, we're really pretty much nearing capacity in terms of what we can program within reasonable hours of operation. So that is certainly something that needs to be discussed and studied more in the future.
I just feel like there's a real need for some more community center type facility out there. Actually, one of the neighborhoods out there is expanding and adding new homes to the neighborhood. So
Well, with the current space we have now, it would be difficult, and I would tell you that staff would say that we need to look at purchasing some additional acreage to program for the current demands as well as others that you mentioned.
well, I hope we can consider that as we look at the next SPLOST.
Ms. Wright? Oh, I'm sorry, you finished?
I think so, yeah.
Ms. Wright?
Well, since you brought up Holland Complex, and I've spent a great deal of my soccer mom life out there, year-round, it is used constantly.
Yeah.
And the soccer is not just the organized sport of the Athens United Soccer Association, but also pickup. We would constantly see, and it was a great neighborhood of people waiting for when the field became open. They didn't try to use it. They knew when an organized event showed up, referees showed up, or coaches with the kids, that they would move on. And then when the tournaments were out there, which are huge tournaments for all 3 of those sports that are out there, they need to use the other fields. So there would be the smaller soccer fields in the baseball fields and that sort of thing. So putting paved basketball courts it's kind of a conflict in sports with the rotation and the volume that's out there now. and also the terrain. I can speak to that because I would do a lot of walking in the time I was there for the soccer practices and games. And one thing that would benefit it would be to have a marked walking trail on the perimeters and that kind of stuff. That can be added to it. But as far as, and coming from Kentucky, I know what it takes to do basketball fields and basketball courts and pickup ones. But so I think the location of that, although the need is there in the community, I don't know that that would be the location because of the terrain.
Well, I will say, go ahead, sorry.
And then the thing about adding bike polo to the tennis courts, if we're, with this agenda item, if I'm reading it correctly, getting them all where they need to be for tennis, which is a very high specification surface and criteria, and that the nets have to be a certain height and stay that, I can see that maybe we should be marking some parking lots to have it like painted for an area for bike polo if it doesn't need to be fenced in, and that sort of thing. So it might be that we can provide that alternative sport without a possible degradation for the tennis. But that's my thought on that.
I'll come back to you. Mr. Girtz.
Just a very brief note about Holland. We're going to be talking about the Greenway network plan in the coming months. And, one of the real goals of that plan is to connect our public facilities with greenways, and Holland would be one that would benefit from that. And so in a lot of ways, it makes it more accessible and more functional in that would be a headway for the greenways. So, while we may not have the acreage to do kind of more on site there, I think it becomes more functional if soccer mom drops their kids off and then can go for a stroll down the Greenway.
Ms. Dickerson.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we're going to give consideration to bike polo, we need to keep in mind that pickleball is being using those courts as well, and they're having to move equipment around, bring their own, store it, that kind of stuff. And so I think we just got to keep that in mind that, we don't step on their feet as well. So.
Yeah. Mr. Neesmith.
Yes, and we can't use the Athens Farmers Market as an example of how courts can be used for something besides tennis, because I witnessed the negotiations that had to go on before Leisure Services would agree to put the tents inside the pavilion, and that is that we're required to pad those tents. And then I was going to mention pickleball.
Anybody else, Ms. Link?
Can we play cricket out there?
Oh, go ahead. Did you want to be recognized, Sandy?
I said, can we play cricket out there?
No, cricket's outlawed in this town.
Intramural fields is where they play cricket.
I want to point out that bike polo requests the tennis courts because they're fenced in. They can't play on a big open parking lot because apparently the ball can go flying out. Yeah. And also, I do want to point out the need for basketball out there, because you walk around in the neighborhoods out there and every other block there's kids playing basketball in the street, and they've dragged a hoop out into the middle of the street, which if we don't want kids playing in the street, we probably need to think about giving them some facilities.
Okay, are y'all okay with this?
Leave no discussion.
Okay, discussion, thank you. Number 8, moving on, Sidewalk Gap Program. Anybody have discussion on that? Ms. Wright and then Ms. Link.
Yeah, I am so glad I got my questions to the manager so that he could update me about how these are preliminary plans and the process. If I could, and on page 43 in the packet, it talks about the options and lists how these are project concepts and authorizing the development of preliminary sidewalk construction. And I would like the manager to address that process as far as the input and us having public forums so that that we can accurately describe to the public whose streets these are about how the process will be made to determine exactly which side it would be on.
And I appreciate your questions, Commissioner Wright. They are great points, and really as we go through these are concepts, and what is meant to show you is the connectivity that we're trying to achieve. Now, when we go down that next level of analysis, we'll come up with slightly more detailed intent and design, and then we will have public forums, and we will give people the opportunity, the folks who are going to be impacted, to come out and share their opinions with us. And then we'll take that information into account and finalize a draft preliminary design, then we'll bring it back to you for approval. And I'm not sure, some of these I'm not sure you're going to see all 24 at the same time. They'll probably be in bits and pieces because it's going to be a lot of design involved. Obviously, we can't afford all of them, so once we go through that process, I think we'll have a better idea of cost, and then we'll try to prioritize it as best we can.
Okay, so thank you. So my other questions and inquiries can now be shelved, and I look forward to that process where we get to more detail. Thank you.
Mr. Link.
I know we're going through this bike pedestrian master plan process. How does that fit in with these? I mean, it kind of makes sense to me to like let that planning process happen and then address these. Is that?
Well, that's up to you. I mean, we've got a good bit of money that we can begin spending. And so our thought is to take that next step. This all takes a while. You know, you can see how these history items accumulate. I'm not sure it preempts anything if something comes out of the bike ped. Well, on the one hand, you are helping to inform the bike ped master plan that these are some important connections that you want to make, you know, while it's being developed. So we'll continue design. I expect that will culminate probably about a year from now, and we may have had some under construction at that point, perhaps. But certainly we could revisit those concepts and reprioritize those if you have some that you really want to address.
Well, I'm also kind of concerned, and Kelly might be able to answer this better. It seems like some of these streets, we're duplicating a sidewalk on the opposite side of the road, and that's certainly necessary on some of your heavy traffic, high-speed streets. But on other streets that are more neighborhood streets, like maybe the Plaza and King and Southview maybe, it seems like maybe those resources could be spent somewhere else where there's absolutely no sidewalk, like Vincent Drive or Brooklyn Avenue, where I have requested sidewalks, and they do have some traffic issues on Brooklyn Avenue. And Vincent Drive, that's where Holland is, and there's no sidewalk out there and lots of dense development. So maybe, you know, on those kind of neighborhood streets, it might be more financially feasible to install speed tables and calm the traffic to get people across the street to the sidewalk across the street and spend those sidewalk resources somewhere else.
Well, and you've asked a good question about the plaza. Now, typically, if we're having on both sides of the street, we're trying to, you know, we're connecting bus stops or destinations to keep people from doing mid-block crossings because that's dangerous.
There's no
But
bus on Plaza.
We'll take another look at plaza. I said typically that's what we do.
And King doesn't have a bus stops on it
So we'll
either.
take a look at that and respond to everybody.
I'd just rather see these resources go places where there's absolutely no sidewalk and it's, you know, really scary, and places where you can maybe calm the traffic a little and make it easier for folks to cross and get to the sidewalk.
Mike, you're next.
Okay, well, I do have an area where those resources can go, and I don't know that I've seen this on the list. I may have overlooked it, and I don't disagree with the concept of getting one side done and coming back and doing the other side. But part of the conversation, from my understanding, with the SPLOST committee was that they looked at, in part of our transportation, they looked at areas where you obviously know that there's a well-worn path, and I know they do that. And if you ever go out between Sycamore Drive and Alps, there's part of a sidewalk there in some areas, but there's a huge gap there, right in Sycamore Drive going to the bus stop and right in front of ABC Package. You know what I'm talking about. You can obviously see the grass and that would be a perfect spot for a sidewalk if there ever was a need for one. There is that, because the path is so obvious. And it does get, you know, muddy and such when it rains out there. So, anyway, if y'all could look at seeing what you could do to add that to the list, that would take it away from. Melissa just made some resources available. So thank you, if that works. Appreciate it.
Smith.
Yeah, likewise, Atlanta Highway, there's a well-worn path and great pedestrian crossings put there by GDOT along the area around the mall. So I was glad to see these. They're the gap, filling the gaps is a good idea, but I was a little confused about putting the sidewalks on Atlanta Highway at Camellia Drive. I always heard when we talked about sidewalks on Atlanta Highway that there was a GDOT issue. So why isn't there a GDOT issue here?
Well, we've got some state highways broken out on page 72 of 141. And I think our thought was, you know, we saw that the need was there. And Mike, I need to check the address of 2330 West Broad to Athens Business Center.
That's on the other side.
That's on the other
It's
side.
it's near
Okay.
the Red Lobster.
Gotcha. So the thought was there that we recognize there's a need there. We want to reach out to DOT and see if we can leverage some funds from their perspective.
I hope we can prioritize that. The need for sidewalks on Atlanta Highway is almost as great as any other place in town that doesn't have sidewalks. There's obviously places that need them, but have them. And I see people crossing Atlanta Highway every day, taking their lives into their hands and standing under bus stops that aren't sheltered, and I could go on. I have one other question. The sidewalk that's called 2330 West Broad to Beach Haven Church shows the graphic shows pedestrian crossings at Camellia Drive. I don't believe there are any. Is this graphic saying that we might put some there? Am I wrong?
It's that light.
I'm going back to look at that. I think we are, if you can see where, I think the blue shows where we're crossing, I think that would be an improvement, pedestrian safety improvement that would be incorporated as part of the project.
I don't see any blue.
And what page are you on, Jerry?
Well, I'm on 25 of 32. I take each of the agenda items separately, so.
It's 65 in the package.
Okay.
It's right there by Arby, if you don't mind me interjecting, right across the traffic light at Arby's.
Well, this is an aerial photograph, so.
Yeah.
It is a photograph,
So-
okay.
Those are there.
All right.
Okay.
I guess so.
Mr.
Thank you.
Girtz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is, I guess, kind of the second of three stages, as we've discussed. LRC brought the concept forward to the full mayor and commission several months ago. This applies that concept to some specific roads based on the criteria that came out of the committee plan. And then, as we discussed a couple of minutes ago, the specific projects with budgets and kind of more engineering specific plans are going to be coming forward. And I do also want to emphasize that this really is something of an interim program pending that bike ped master plan. And of course, concurrent with the development of the bike ped master plan is our call for SPLOST projects. I mean, what's great is that, you know, I think even given sort of a modest commitment to sidewalks and ped access in SPLOST, we could be tripling or quadrupling what we do every year. And so rather than just filling in a few missing teeth, you know, we could look in a linear way along any number of corridors, whether that's Spring Valley Road or Tallahassee Road or Atlanta Highway. And I would be interested in hearing more. I mean, certainly the details may not be available tonight, but I would be interested in hearing more about what we can do to engage GDOT on some of these corridors. Oak Street is listed here. Certainly there are large stretches of Lexington Highway without sidewalks, and I can't tell you the number of times I see people cross kind of in the judicial complex area there, just cross the street and hang out in that median on a 5-lane road. So I'd like to hear specifically how we can leverage some GDOT dollars for those state corridors, because there's so many of those that are in need.
Ms. Dickerson?
I was just wondering, on item 8, we talk about state and federal money, and I guess my other thought was SPLOST. Are we going to try to tap into that at all for any of the ones we can't fund in this? I mean, are we going to be able to do that at the same time? I know we've got sort of deadlines on SPLOST, which we have a lot of requests for SPLOST too, but.
So the answer is yes. I think what y'all would probably do to be able to prioritize at the time that you have more information, like the bike ped master plan, is you create a bucket like we have for pedestrian safety and sidewalks, and it'll be there for y'all to decide as projects come forward if that's what you want to do or push for something else.
Okay.
So that's up to the Citizens Advisory Committee and of course y'all as to what that referendum looks like.
Okay.
Mr. Harrod?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm just looking at the maps, and obviously the little blue lines are crosswalks. So I'm looking just at two, on page 57 of the PDF, there's a crosswalk that is intended to come to link the bottom of Cedar Creek Drive to cross Whit Davis and to link to the other side of the street. And then there's also on page 60, 2 crosswalks at the intersection of Old Lexington and Whit Davis Road. Maybe this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because obviously no engineering has been done yet. But is the plan to just have those literally kind of marked on the street, or would they include sort of refuge islands? And how involved are crosswalks in what you're suggesting here?
So if I'm not mistaken, that's a 4-way stop there, or?
Old Lexington and Whit Davis? Yes.
That's a
traffic light.
Is there a traffic light there? So since it's at a traffic light, typically the RFBs, we will use those at a mid-block crosswalk. So you've got a protected, with the light, you've got a protected sequence there, if that's the case. So I think, and you're right, we would wait to hear from our traffic engineers on that, but my gut reaction would be that this would just be a crosswalk you'd use in tandem with the light.
Okay, I was actually thinking less about that one specifically, though, but more about the ones that are kind of not at intersections.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking about how far the money will go, because obviously building a refuge island costs more, and so it's safer, but the more of those we do, the less we get to build for the same amount of money. So I guess my question is, so for example, for the Cedar Creek Drive crosswalk, is that just literally some white lines painted on the road, or is your intention to for not just that one, but for these other types of crosswalks that are mid-block to have refuge islands?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of our traffic engineers. Coming out of there, typically a mid-block is going to have a refuge island, but in this case, you have a Cedar Creek Drive coming into it. So you think about, you're going to have left turn movements leaving out of Cedar Creek, and so we just have to take a good look at that. I think it'd be unusual to put a refuge island there right at that intersection.
Cedar Creek doesn't. I thought that dead ends in there. Isn't that just a sidewalk coming off of there, or can you actually drive onto that road there?
No, it dead ends.
Oh, I couldn't see. Sorry.
So that's right before the dog park. You can see the top of the dog park, but there's I think there's something there. There's markings on the ground, I think.
So okay.
I guess my question, just maybe I'm not asking my question very clearly, but just in general terms, are these on any of these maps where we have the blue lines indicating crosswalks? Is the intention generally for them to be with refuge islands or not? Because obviously, if they are with refuge islands, we can do all of this in this budget. That's great.
Right.
If they're just white strips painted on the road,
right,
and we wanted to change those to refuge islands, then obviously we can't do as much as what we have on this list because it's going to cost more. That's my question.
Okay, and it's a good question, and we haven't gotten that far down design. And the refuge island is an enhanced safety feature, and I think when we analyze that area, and I don't have great personal knowledge of it, we'll see if it's warranted, and we can share those thresholds with you. We've started experimenting with those refuge islands and kind of seeing how it plays out. It's obviously an enhancement, though.
Good. Anybody else? Okay, I think this one needs to stay on discussion too. Number 9 is the Oconee Rivers Greenway Network Connectors. Who would like to discuss that, or anybody?
Somebody must know.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you would, and I didn't see you half your hand up.
It took me a moment.
Mr. Neesmith.
Well, this is another one of those projects that's been vetted and discussed a great deal. And I think what we have is something that's the consensus of the Greenway Commission and of Leisure Services staff and probably some other departments. So I hope we can move forward with this.
Anybody else want to discuss it? Okay, we'll leave this one on discussion too, I think. Item number 10 is request of creation of two new full-time victim advocates positions in the DA's office, funded entirely through the Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA as we call it, grant funds. And I had a letter today and this is covers the Superior Court District, or the DA's district covers Oconee County too. And I got a letter from the Oconee County Commission to let us know that they support this fully too. So, any discussion on that? Yes, ma'am.
I actually had a question about the one before. Is there a possibility I could go back and ask a question?
Sure,
on
that's
that?
why we have this meeting.
Okay. So on item 7, there was a recommendation, I'm sorry, on page 79 of the PDF, there was a recommendation made by ORG, or the Oconee Rivers Greenway. My question is the option that's presented before us, is that inclusive of what, if you look at item 7, it says staff's not opposed to the recommendation to reduce the trail width, but then we have approved the preliminary plan as the option. It doesn't mention anything about that, so I'm just wondering if we can get some clarity on whether or not the staff recommendation includes the recommendation by Oconee Rivers Greenway. It wasn't clear to me that it did, and I didn't know, just clarify.
Mr. Neesmith may have the answer.
Except it is the reduction from 14 feet to 12 feet plane.
I think the only, we're in agreement. It's just we don't have the best, transition area to take that down. And so when we start getting into the final design, we'll identify that and incorporate that recommendation. Is that consistent with?
Should the option say that, though? Because I don't think the option says that. I don't think. I just want to make sure if we're voting, if we're saying it does, that the option says that we're taking that we do intend to do that. And I don't think it does right now.
Okay.
So.
That reduction is not currently in the plans in front of you. It will be handled in final design. If y'all want to clarify that at the voting meeting, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Great. Okay, we'll move back to item
Or we can add some language to clarify that.
Item
Okay.
10, did anyone have anything to say about that? Consent?
Can we put it on consent?
Okay, right. Okay, then, item 11 is the Audit Committee's recommendation for the Leisure Services Summer Camp Program. And I thought our auditor might like to just give us a quick overview of this.
I'd be happy to. I put together talking points for Madam Mayor and the Commission to summarize the findings and recommendations at a broad level. 12 findings and 39 recommendations were, were identified in the Leisure Services audit of the summer camp program. These findings and recommendations fall into 3 broad categories, which are department operations, financial activities, and programming. The focus of department operations was on standard operating procedures, organizational structure, and goals and objectives. The most notable recommendation under department operations cited the need to establish long-range planning, which included a community needs assessment and program analysis. Several recommendations encouraged an increase in collaborative efforts among the staff to share processes that have worked well and to identify those that are challenging. The final area of focus was a recommendation to ensure summer camp volunteers underwent a background screening. In the next section, financial activities address the program's operating budget, cost recovery, and scholarship program. Primary recommendations relate to strengthening budget monitoring procedures, establishing the true costs of the various camps, and implementing methods to track program data for long-term planning. Also, a recommendation was made to expand programming opportunities by seeking private partner sponsorships. The focus of the recommendations under programming include camp registration, community needs, and program equity. One recommendation was to explore online camp registration options, which was recently implemented. Another recommendation emphasized the need to provide a more consistent approach to program planning amongst the camps.
Any commissioners have any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I want to commend Stephanie for all the work she put in on this. This was a mammoth task. And I'm excited to hear about the commitment to a community needs assessment. The feedback I hear out in the community has less to do with, the folks who are actually, the kids and the families that are actually using the camps than the families that don't use the camps or are unable to access those camps for whatever reason. And I really feel like we need to focus more on reaching those families, whether it's through additional scholarships or sponsorship or additional programming where we do have opportunities for more drop-in after school or summer programs. And I know that back in supposedly the 80s, there used to be a program called Grand Slam that targeted teenagers. And it was a Friday night program, and it was drop-in. Was it Saturday night?
Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday night. Okay. So I'd love for us to look at those kind of programs to meet more general needs in the community and folks who maybe can't commit to a specific camps but have the opportunity to just drop in and meet some of those recreational needs for these kids.
Ms. Ron?
I guess since this is kind of our first audit coming out and coming to this point, I was hoping that Commissioner Harrod could give some feedback since he was the chairman ahead of this, or anybody's veteran advice, or just letting us know how does this move forward. If we accept the report, does that mean we expect everything that says it's going to happen, or because some of the implications are one, and I think we've maybe talked about doing this during the budget process, addressing the scholarship program. These are all budget-related discussions, as well as one of the things that stood out to me in this was learning that Sandy Creek Park Camp and Sandy Creek Nature Camp, they have accreditation level that none of the other camps do. And if we were to look into the future and say what would be great to make them all similar would be that they all had that accreditation. And Randy Smith, who's at the Sandy Creek Nature Center, he's on the committee that goes and does site accreditations type thing. And just getting to know what that means, and this is all budget-related commitments that we would need to do for some of these things. So I'm trying to understand how we take this and implement it. So I'm looking forward to feedback.
Well, Mr. Harrod had his hand raised. He put it back down after all those questions. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Typically, as the process that was followed here is obviously the report comes together, it's submitted to the manager's office, the manager's office gives response, and the responses here seem fairly typical in terms of other types of audits, in the sense that sometimes the manager's office says, yes, this sounds like a great idea, we have no problem, we can go ahead and do it with minimal cost. Yes, this sounds like a good idea, but it's going to have some significant budgetary costs, or we appreciate the input, but we disagree with the findings. And so, I think at the end of the day, it's really up to us as the elected officials to determine how we want to proceed on this, and if there are certain things that obviously have significant budgetary considerations that come with them, or costs that come with them, then that's something we'd have to discuss at budget time. My sense, and I don't want to speak for the manager's office, but my sense is that a lot of the findings here, the manager's office seemed to think were a good idea and could be implemented with really very little budgetary impact. Is that a fair statement?
I think some of them have already been implemented. And so I would say this, I think, to your point, Commissioner, that we would offer a status update 6 months into it and to kind of report back on how we're making progress and what's been done, and try to do that in something fairly brief so that you can digest it pretty easily and understand where we're heading and give us any other direction you'd like us to take.
So that I did have a couple of questions, though, that I think are really more directed to the manager's office than to the internal auditor. But at our Government Operations Committee meeting last month, I think it was, we did discuss a little bit the issue of leisure services, and two issues did come up. One was the issue with regards to scholarships, and apparently there are some, if I remember the discussion correctly, there are some scholarships that are offered that then do not get taken up, but they are not taken up at such a late date that they are really not, it's not possible to offer them to other individuals. And the second thing that came up was the issue of a differential pricing for Athens-Clarke County residents versus non-Athens-Clarke County residents. And I certainly would like to, as we proceed through the process of thinking about this audit, but also through the budgetary process, I would like us to seriously consider both of those issues.
And we're hopeful that those are things that the GOC will take up. And I appreciate that y'all are doing that in the context of the total cost recovery policy as well and not independent of. That'll help inform that effort.
Anybody else? I think we probably should leave this on discussion too.
I have one
Oh,
question.
Mr. Neesmith, I'm sorry.
I heard, of course, more compliments than complaints about the online registration for the summer camps, but I did hear some complaints. And usually it was from people who really had difficulty even complaining because they have lack of internet, lack of computers in their home, etc., where they felt like they were at a great disadvantage in summer camp registration because they didn't have access to a computer and or the internet. I would hope that you would consider how we can help equalize that opportunity for them in some way. Right now, there was no way to register except online, is the way I understand it. I couldn't find a way.
Well, there was actually, I think for most all the camps, that they could come in and pay by, I think, cash or check.
But that was not online. Well, I guess if they can't get online,
Yeah,
then
that
we know it.
wouldn't matter.
But it wasn't there either.
Recognizing that there may be households that aren't internet challenged for a variety of reasons, Leisure Services did coordinate not only in our community centers but also at the library in order to offer the free access to the computers to register online at our sites. Tried to market that, had very limited participation in that offering, but we'll continue to do that as well and consider other options.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay, we'll move on to item number 12, which is Legislative Review Committee's recommendation for Sunday alcohol sales. Mr. Girtz?
This falls under the banner of you can't say the General Assembly never did anything for us. So beginning in calendar 2017, communities have the opportunity to select a Sunday during which those establishments that normally have to be closed can be open. And so our staff, I think, did a good job soliciting some feedback from the bar owners. Got I think about a 40% return rate in pretty quick turnaround time, which is pretty good for kind of public polling. And the vast, overwhelming desire was to designate for 2017 December 31st, which is a Sunday, as that opportunity to serve at our non-food serving bars. The further LRC recommendation, in addition to that specific date for 2017, is that we have an annual process in which there will be a resolution following a similar survey for years ahead. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Well, they had to respond pretty quick, didn't they?
They did.
for the 31st. Anybody else have any?
Of next year, of 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant this year, so, okay. Mr. Harrod.
Just a question out of curiosity, and I certainly don't have any problem with the recommended evening, but the New Year's Eve was so overwhelmingly favored by the bars. Did you have any indication as to why that, as opposed to Super Bowl Sunday or some other Sunday?
I think it's just because New Year's Eve happened to fall on a Sunday this year, and I think it's in the report that unanimously they wanted a survey in future years so that they could have an opportunity for perhaps Super Bowl Sunday the following year or some others.
Ms. Raleigh.
I can share that a general manager of 3 different bars downtown told me, when I said we were putting this survey out and said that next year New Year's Eve falls on Sunday, he goes, "Oh my word, that is such a moneymaker for us. We need to be open." And so I'm taking that as their profit, a big profit day for them. And then I forgot the other part that I was going to say. Oh well, that was his input on that. And then the other part was that it was unanimous that they wanted to say it. Super Bowl does have a nice ring to it, Super Bowl Sunday. So we'll see when they get their alcohol license renewal packet, the survey will be in there every year for them to turn it back
good.
in.
That's good.
And so that'll be reaching them for the consideration to then implement based on their input. So I think it's another plus too when people say you don't reach out for our opinion, and then this will be an annual cycle of where we are reaching out for that opinion, and hopefully we'll learn what other communities pick as well And maybe if we pick Super Bowl Sunday, nobody else will.
So consent agenda, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we're now going to go to our closed meeting, so we have to ask our guests to leave us.